What is, where will the New World Order be?
What we can see for sure is that those who hold the greatest power and wealth generally determine the future of humanity. Gone from the days of empires and monarchs. Power is held in the glass towers. The reality is we now live in a world of exponential technology, what we're seeing with AI, surveillance state. You could take a culture where you could automate everything. You could cancel free speech. What quality of life would we have left?
But right now, with a fight on information, a fight on freedom of speech, a fight on property rights, your liberty, and now, of course, a war. So where does this end? I do not know.
Footage from the Houses of Parliament taken down. How does democracy work when you can't even show the inner workings of it?
But before we dive in, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notification bell on.
Revolution, New World Order. Rob, are we on the precipice of World War III?
I think we're the closest to World War III that I can remember we've ever been. I do remember thinking when Trump was at his fever pitch, he seems to be losing control. I can't remember the last time we got this close to World War III. Now look, Dan, I'm not a doom monger, but I can tell you this. A lot of people I knew didn't think Brexit would happen. It did. No one predicted COVID. It happened. A lot of people said to me, Putin won't invade. He did. So one thing that springs to mind is we mustn't let hubris and complacency get in the way. Obviously, I'm a bit torn because I don't want to go live saying, World War III could be here. But I believe you must plan for the worst as well as hope for the best.
Yeah, agreed. Interesting you mentioned Trump, the fears around this type of thing previously. Do you think this would have been happening if Trump was still in power? Is this has the role of Biden played a role in this, or is there something more to this?
Well, if you follow Trump on social, if you can find him anywhere, he's not been banned from. I follow his son, and his son puts a lot of his media out. Of course, he would tell you how he would have handled it differently. I mean, Donald Trump is a strong character, and he does embody the Americans can't be bullied. But I just want everyone to know I'm not a hater of all government, and I'm not a hater of all leaders. And it's easy for you and I to sit here in the studio and criticise them. But if you were Biden and I were Putin, of course we'd have a different view. What I will say is, Biden tweeted publicly saying, any NATO military intervention is World War III. And I was actually quite pleased he tweeted that, because that is public accountability that NATO and America will have to do everything they can to not intervene in a military fashion, which I'm not a believer in war. Wars have to happen. If you go back through history, conflict does equal war. I accept that. But I was pleased that the intervention is from blocking information, blocking money, sanctions as such. So I'm not a massive critic of Biden. I don't think he's necessarily handled it badly because, a lot of people on my lives, they go, just get rid of Putin, just send the bombs in. That is, to me, human life should be preserved. It should be a last action. So I was more of a fan of, the sanctions of finances and blocking all the finance, and I actually think that was a good way to suffocate, the advancements of Russia with all the sanctions that have happened. I think Trump probably would have been more aggressive. I don't know if that is the answer. What do you think?
Well, I mean, some people are arguing that if Trump was still in power, he had a different relationship with Putin. By the way, we're keeping a Putin count throughout this episode to see if we reach a certain number and you get cancelled.
Let's see if we can get cancelled live.
Maybe we'll try and use the term Putin inappropriately just to see what happens. But we will be touching on cancel culture, but we'll come back to that. But I think there are people out there who think that if Trump had still been in power, he had a different relationship. It could have played out differently. But as you said, the reality, he's not.
Well, Trump does respect Putin and thinks he's a very smart person. So clearly they must have had some kind of relationship.
Yeah, well, I think all of this comes back down to the relationships that people have.
Yeah.
Diplomacy requires some form of relationship, but we've seen complete breakdown of diplomacy. Are we on the edge of World War III? Well, I think it's important to see the warning signs. I think people do need to take it seriously, but at the same time...
Well, how's Putin getting out of this now?
Well, good question.
People have been saying they need to let him save face. I remember a billionaire speaking to me, and I asked him what's the best advice he ever got. And he said, when you back a rat into a corner, always give it a hole to exit through. And I remember that. And if you push someone with a strong ego or dictatorial qualities into a corner, they're probably going to fight.
Yes.
You have to give them something to exit stage left.
Yes.
I do actually agree with that.
Well, that's also why it's important that we don't just bombard Russia, because you're absolutely going to trigger the beast. And, you know, at the precipice of World War III with nuclear potential, we don't really want to poke the bear so far that someone pulls that trigger, because that is catastrophic loss of life. You know, that is a decision that you can't come back from. So it's a really complex situation. What's your take? Why do you think why is this happening now in the way that it is?
Well, I think if you look back through history, you see cycles of peace and war. And I think people think, generally speaking, assuming we're all of reasonably good humanity, that war is bad and peace is good. But there are always cycles in history of peace and war. And we haven't had a war. Well, we've had quite a few wars, but we haven't had a world war for, you know, not quite a century. But I bet if you go back through history, it's quite hard to find a century without a serious war. Now, of course, every war that's happened is serious. And there have been, you know, of course, the Gulf War, and there's been many wars. But so cycles is one thing. Another thing I think is when people are upset and angry enough, and because I don't think there's just a war on the division of Russia and Ukraine. I think there's a war on freedom of speech. I think there's a war on council culture, a war on our ability to speak our mind without getting shadow banned or banned. A war, language is now used as a weapon, like, oh, that's misinformation. That's like me saying, you're a, you know. So language is now being used as a weapon.
Yes.
And it reminds me that I think in cycles, you often have strong leadership comes out of hard times. Strong leadership then creates good times. Good times creates weak leadership. Weak leadership creates hard times. Hard times create strong leadership. Strong leadership creates good times. And you see this cycle going round. And it's not directly answered your question, but I think that cycles have a big part to play in it.
Well, I think it does directly answer the question on the basis, whilst it doesn't break down the complexities of the situation in Russia, Ukraine, all of that, you know, we could speculate over. But the cycles piece actually is probably the most important piece, because we're so busy in the kind of present moment doing our thing that we rarely take that macro stock, look at what's going on in the world in terms of those cycles. But the reality is history does show us some level of predictability to what's happening in the world today. In fact, Ray Dalio, if you haven't seen it, he's done a fantastic 45-minute video on the last 500 years. And you could pretty much to a T, and he recorded this prior to the Russian conflict, and you could see it on the charts that something like this was on its way.
Yeah.
So it does become a predictor, but the big question is it also a predictor of the future? Because what we're seeing now in the UK, you know, we've just had the budget announcements. We're coming off the back of COVID, where it's had huge economic ramifications. You know, how do we move forward from that? Again, if you look at the cycle.
Well, they say luck bad comes in threes. So Brexit, COVID, Putin, that's a pretty bad little run there.
Yeah, I hope someone's keeping count. I think that's 4 or 5 times we've had Putin. And by the way, if you're watching this live now, I'm here at the Disruptor Studios. My name is Dan Aston Gregory. Delighted to be here with Rob Moore today, unpacking some of these big picture stories, asking the question, are we on the precipice of revolution? Are we on the kind of tipping point of a World War III? These big picture conversations that I think many of us are having in our minds. We're witnessing what's happening in the world, trying to make sense of the situation in order to find our way through it. I think many of us probably watching this are, if not all of us, are pro-peace. You know, I can't make that assumption, but you know, I would personally, having been a new father, don't want to live in a world with conflict in the way that we're witnessing now. But again,
but the problem is, and I hear you,
yes,
but it's a utopic fantasy to believe we can exist in a non-conflict world. And that's because we all have a unique set of values. So I'm going to throw a solution straight out there right now. And this is naive and it's a fantasy. It's an ideology and that can be a problem. But the only way I believe we'll ever be in a world where we don't have wars is, one, by respecting and understanding each other's values. This is really important. Because what is a conflict? A conflict is I believe X and you believe Y.
Yes.
Therefore, you're wrong and I'm right. And therefore, I will fight to defend my values and I will fight against yours because yours are wrong and mine are right. You're a socialist. I'm a capitalist.
Right.
You're extreme left. I'm right. You know, so the only way we navigate conflict, we have to be open about what challenges our values. Because what often happens in conflict is there's repression, and then there's a too big of an expression. You know, we've all held things in only for them to explode later. But also, I have to care enough about you to learn your values, to understand what motivates and drives you and who you are and what will challenge your values. And if I want to sell you on a vision, a dream, a product, a service, the way I can most do that is understand your values and link my discussion, my debate, my offer to your values. And what happens is all conflict comes, I believe, from a opposition of values, whether it's on a family level, a local level, a county level, a country level, a continent level, or a global level. So obviously in the world of politics and war, we have a big values difference between NATO and Russia, or America and Putin, or China, and or whatever else. So it's ideological, yes, but you never resolve conflict by fighting it. If I fight you and I win, do you go, oh, Rob, I'm really happy. Thanks for beating me.
Yeah.
No, you plan your next move and you
Yes.
come back bigger and stronger to fight me and defeat me back. And this is what we've been doing for tens of thousands of years. Now, we used to be barbarians. We don't need to be barbarians anymore. So we have to learn to appreciate each other's values, meet in the middle, and that's on a global level, that's called a treaty. You know, we need to meet on a level. And also, like, I have to allow you your freedom to disagree with me. And people don't do this. Like, I like you if you agree with me, but if you disagree with me, I'm going to ban you, cancel you, deplatform you, or bomb you.
Yes.
This is wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm frustrated because I think we surely should be more evolved as humanity. We understand our brain, the science that's available to us. Yet in many ways, I feel like we're de-evolving back. You know that famous image of the Neolithic man sort of going from a Neanderthal upwards into a human being, Homo erectus or whatever we are. Well, I feel like we're going back down. So anyway.
Well, evolution, I'll hold evolution because that's a really important point on this journey, because actually you could argue we're on a pathway to either self-termination or self-transcendence. And, you know, I would argue for a pathway towards transcendence, but I'll come to that on the evolution. But on your point here around values and our ability to resolve conflict, what's really interesting mentioning Brexit, COVID, the war, all of these have been deeply polarizing subjects. You know, they've torn people apart, they've put people into camps. But what's really interesting from a social dynamics perspective is there's this theory called terror management theory. And basically, when we're in fear, when we're in conditions where we are fearful for our own mortality or we're fearful of a widespread change, what tends to happen, so look at Brexit, you know, it put you straight into your identity position. Often, you know, people reflect back on those decisions were done on very micro levels rather than an assessment of the overall situation. Not speaking for everyone, but, you know, that's some of the commentary. But then COVID, perceived existential threat, particularly in the way that it was managed. Now war, you know, mortality. So the terror management theory suggests that when we're in fear in this way, we gravitate towards that worldview, those identity polarities. And what that does is it makes us more likely to cling on to our pre-existing view. It makes us more likely to enter into conflict. So the fact that we've gone from Brexit, COVID, to war means that we're actually more likely to continue this journey of polarization. We're actually more likely to continue to fall out. But how we get to that point of recognition of diplomacy, you know, understanding your point of view, understanding someone else's point of view. I mean, there'll be people watching this now who've got completely different opinions to Rob and I. But if we were to sit in a room, we may not ever come to a conclusion that we all accept, but we can come to a shared understanding. But in the context of war, quite clearly that ability to understand one another has broken down to the point where weapons are being fired. How do you what is going to mark the end of this? Where do you think this is going to go?
I'm no war expert. I'm not.
Oh, so disappointing. I've come to the wrong place.
Sorry. The reason you and I are talking about this is because every now and again, there's more important things than the things that we do.
Yes.
So I'm an entrepreneur and I help people start and scale their business and get better financial knowledge. But right now, with a fight on information, a fight on freedom of speech, a fight on, your property rights, your liberty, and now, of course, a war, it's important that we use our platform to try and put out a positive message. But I'm always very honest about where my limits are, and I'm not a study of war history. So where does this end? I do not know. But I do know that I will interrupt my content every single day to promote peace, not war, to promote treaties and negotiations and letting people save face and finding ways to end mass conflict and to encourage other people to do the same. So I hope it ends between those two nations. But how can it? How can it?
Yes.
This is why I'm a bit worried about this being the closest to World War III, because Putin takes Ukraine. What's he going to stop there? Somehow he manages to retreat. I don't see how it ends. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but what I do know is any military intervention, the US president has said, is World War III. So it probably ends by cutting off information and cutting off money supply, which they've been doing. And it ends in giving Putin some kind of exit, which he's in some way satisfied with.
Yes.
But then here's something that people don't often admit. You only know what you know based on the research you can do. And some of your research has to come from mainstream media. And you're already skeptical about mainstream media.
Very much so.
So what you know has got to be at least 3 or 4 iterations away from the reality. The only way you'd really know what's going on is if you are Putin's right-hand man, or you are the US president. So we all think we know more than we do.
Indeed.
And, I've lost a lot of respect for the neutrality of sites like the BBC, which that used to be a big thing about the great British Broadcasting Corporation, the institution of balanced information. But no, they have their own fact-checking system, which is really, we don't agree with you.
Yes.
And so mainstream media is being disrupted, and the continued disruption of mainstream media, I think, is linked to where this could end, because that's where the propaganda comes through. That's where a lot of the misinformation comes through. Ironically, they accuse others of misinformation. They tried to cancel Joe Rogan. Now, when I said they, who knows? Some people say it's mainstream media. Who's puppet stringing mainstream media? Who knows? But there was a concerted effort to completely dethrone, because he is on a throne, Joe Rogan, to get his show shut down, pressuring Spotify. These sort of older has-been singer celebrities that when you look who the investors are behind them, all link back to mainstream media, blah, blah, blah. So preserving our freedom of speech, decentralizing media so it has less control and less power, so less ability for propaganda, therefore a more balanced and diverse information flow, I think that's linked.
Yes, well, I agree. I mean, back to your point around how to resolve conflict, it requires dialogue and understanding. How can you have understanding when half the conversation is being chopped off? How can you have, throughout the pandemic, we saw endless amounts of censorship, deplatforming, cancel culture.
Across all big tech, and big tech has replaced mainstream TV as the main media outlets. But yet, if an advertiser says, "Oh, I don't want David Icke, or I don't want COVID misinformation on channels where I'm giving you billions of pounds worth of ad spend," what are YouTube going to do? They're obviously going to go, "Oh, okay." And so, but then they have these AI bots. So I like to watch, and I did a Facebook Live, and I said the C word, COVID, once.
Yes.
And then the COVID warning banner comes up at the bottom.
Yep.
I said the word once.
Yes.
When does the Putin warning button come up? Now, this opens up a lot of paradoxes. I'm really grateful to Facebook and I'm really grateful to YouTube because I've been able to build a profile on there. I'm not the sort of person that wants to come into your living room and take a piss on your rug in your living room and discredit your interior design taste in your living room. And the paradox is, big tech has given people like you and I a platform. So in many ways it's good, but I just don't, this is where government are supposed to intervene.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
Many free market capitalists would say government intervene too much. But I think government are just intervening wrong. So they're not intervening in giving big tech more accountability for cancelling and deplatforming. And they're not intervening by reducing taxation and supporting business and economy. So I feel like they're intervening in the wrong areas.
Yes. Well, I mean, the economics of free market has changed radically from the
Well, there is no free market anymore.
No, but if you look at the economics of Adam Smith and the idea that we have this, these goods that would just create demand for and people will buy them and it will create this conditions where, the best providers will create the products to serve the needs of the market, that's completely transformed. So the free market is no longer the free market. We have to play by the rules of the systems we're operating in. There's no such thing as an inert piece
or hold them to account.
Or hold them to account.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think this is where we're at this kind of turning point, because where social media began and where it is today is very different. And how, whether it's down to the government, whether it's its users, we've seen a complete lack of that kind of collective kind of bargaining of the social media platforms. Despite all of the censorship in the last 2 years, how much pushback has there been really, apart from people going on the very same platforms and saying this is unacceptable? How many legal challenges have there been? How many broad attempts to restore free speech has there been? My view is we haven't gone far enough, and I think we have to wrestle that back, because you're absolutely right.
For example, I don't think Facebook should have been allowed to cancel Donald Trump. I don't think Twitter should have been allowed to cancel Donald Trump. I know that's contentious because a lot of people think that he incited violence, but come on, did he really? And there's plenty of people who have social media accounts who do incite violence.
Yes.
We won't mention any extremists, but there are. So yeah, but that's, Nigel Farage says to me that governments are basically scared of big tech because of the amount of power they have. So the government don't really intervene in instances like that. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, why should he get cancelled and others not? What's the fair justification? Well, it's our platform. I didn't agree with that.
No, well, it
Did you?
What, Trump getting...
Yeah.
No. I mean, we've seen it even in our own borders here in the United Kingdom. We've seen, the idea of democracy. We've seen footage from the Houses of Parliament taken down from YouTube. I mean, how does democracy work when you can't even show the inner workings of it on social media? So whether it's Trump or politicians
and then it fucks up the voting system.
Absolutely.
Because if big tech can cancel and ban and shadow, and the algorithm hides that campaigner but boost this campaigner, then,
Well, yeah. So let me paint a really simple example about how democracy works in the simple terms. You may remember this when you were a child. You get a tub of beans, in a jar, a transparent jar. You can see how many beans are in the jar. You ask 100 people how many beans are in this jar. The principle of aggregation, based across those 100 people, some will woefully underestimate, some will massively overestimate, but enough people will be closer to the actual number that they'll roundabout way guess how many beans there are in the jar. But if you tell people before they guess that people generally overestimate, that's actually going to skew the way they actually vote on how many beans are in the jar. But essentially, this is what's happening on social media. They're skewing the way we see the world in order that when it does come to voting scenarios, we're not actually operating in a true democracy anymore. Not that we necessarily even were, I say anymore, when was the last time we actually were? But my point is, technology has so much power that it's disrupting our ability as citizens to intervene. So on one hand, you mentioned the power of big tech. Well, we've got big tech over here, amassing power, big central...
Which has also done a lot of good for the world, by the way.
I mean, yeah. And centralization brings efficiency.
Did we meet on social media? We probably did.
We probably did, yeah.
We met on Facebook and now we're bitching about Facebook.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
carry on.
But we have this centralization power. But you're absolutely right. Again, this is the problem with the world we live in. We kind of start to demonize centralization as bad. Well, centralization does drive efficiency. It
economies of scale,
all of that stuff that reduces prices for the consumer, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it does come with risks, particularly when it starts to intervene with the political system, which you would argue now it's more than intervened, and that the big tech. Do they have more power than governments right now? Do governments feel like they're under threat? I wonder.
Well, Nigel Farage said to me that our government, UK, is scared of the big tech companies. So he therefore must believe they have more power. He's pretty well into politics, so he knows more than me about that. I couldn't comment. But they did nothing. The US government seemed to do nothing about Trump having his account shut down. Nothing. And here's the problem. If you don't fight for the freedom of speech, even with people you disagree with what they said, you're already losing. So let's say you'd said something which was close to the line, which I didn't agree with, but you were getting, a barrage of cancel damn. I would support you, even if I didn't agree with you, because I shouldn't be able to choose whether you're cancelled or not, or whether you can speak your opinion or not. So I would support you, even if I didn't agree with you. Now, I've got to have faith in the government that they intervene at the right point. So governments, they are there to govern. They intervene, when it moves into legality, criminality, safety, whatever else. So it's a fine line. But I stood up hard for Joe Rogan, even if some of the guests were controversial. Because if BlackRock, if the firms behind who are pulling the strings go, we don't like Joe Rogan's narrative, cancelled, then you and I will be next.
Yep.
And I don't think there are lists of people in the moon, but I don't want David Icke cancelled, because he's been proven right in some things, and he should have his right to speak freely, as long as he's not inciting violence and death, etc. All the while, there are some extremist groups who use social media for terrorism who still have their accounts up. So it's a difficult one. And on the free market thing, as you know, I'm a believer in capitalism, a big fan of it, but I'm actually not a big fan of an extreme free market. Government should at times intervene. For example, child labour was a thing, and government intervened to get rid of child labour, which at the time the capitalists didn't want, because it was cheap labour.
Yep.
In that instance, I thought it was a good government intervention. So there is no such thing as a free market, but there should be, I believe, minimum amount of intervention to not stifle productivity, creativity, innovation. The problem right now is a lot of creativity, innovation, growth, manufacturing and production is being completely stifled. COVID, lockdowns, Brexits and wars. And that's really the only way they're going to kickstart the economy again. I can't remember what thread we were on. But
well, there's a lot intertwined here. Everything from polarization, censorship, cancel culture, big tech, power. You've touched on the economy. That's big news right now. We've just come off the back of a huge economic event in COVID, and now, as we try to recover from this, we face inflation.
So let me just quickly throw the question back on you before we move into increased cost of living, etc., which is crazy. You asked me, how do I think this ends?
Yes.
How do you think this ends?
Well, I actually really like the way you say you need to get out. In order that there has to be some level of compromise within this. There has to be some level of agreement, and I do feel that some level of concession would have to be made.
Isn't that what a treaty is?
Well, it is what a treaty is. Now, this is where the cycles and the macro picture gets even more interesting, because the fact that you're talking about Biden putting the sanctions on Russia, that's going to have an astronomical effect on Russia's economy.
Yeah.
But again,
and our economy.
And our economy, absolutely. Yeah. But also America's, which I'll touch upon.
Yeah.
But also, here's the thing: when we look at the impact of the sanctions, they may or may not put an end to the war. What they will do is absolutely devastate the lives of citizens in Russia, which we're not allowed to talk about on social media. We're not allowed to say positive things about Russia anymore. We can't empathize with the civilians who are suffering because of the war. That's like a dominant position that's been accepted, which again I find awful. Yeah. They're still human beings, just because they were born in a culture.
And not all of them want this war.
Well, how many of them actually do? Yeah. There's a huge peace movement there, but also you have to argue, in the cultures they live in, how easy is it to challenge the government when they do things like this? No one expected them to attack Ukraine. They've shown that military might, but they've also shown that they'll inflict it on their own people. So it becomes a very tricky situation. But the point I was making here is that this is a bigger picture, because now that America has put these sanctions in place, what they've also done in the same process is now weaken confidence in the dollar, because in the same way we were just talking about, if you're willing to cancel Joe Rogan, you and I could be next. People are now looking at America saying, well, you know what, if they're willing to go that hard on Russia, they might do that for us one day. And America has a history of conflict and sanctions that haven't done particularly well. And as a result now, people are losing faith in America. They're losing faith in the dollar. The dollar is beginning to devalue. Their economy is now feeling the hit like we are. But China, meanwhile, are on the ascendancy. So when we look at the big cycles of the economics and political cycles, we know that America is on the decline side, but we also know that China is on the ascendancy, both politically, economically, and as a military power. So when we look at how does this end, a lot of the weight, I would say, is on China's shoulders. And at the beginning, we've already seen the meetings of Putin and Xi Jinping, the president of the China Communist Party. And whether they support Russia or whether they support America, they're walking a fine line, because they stand to gain no matter which way they turn, because they are going to get oil and gas from Russia. But their economy is entirely dependent on America, Europe. Amazon itself is basically a front door for China, really, if you look at where all the goods are coming from. So China is walking this fine line, and the decisions that China make, I think, will determine the future of the war. But it will also, in the context of the title, determine the future of the New World Order. But what would that mean if China become the global superpower? They were pretty much there. Over the last 2 years, over the course of the pandemic, their overseas investment, more billionaires have been created in China than ever before. There's the speculation about where the virus came from. But China have been just growing and growing. But if they become the dominant power here, they could send the war either way. So I think there is an active role in China, both in ending the war, but also I think they will have a significant impact on the economic and political future of the rest of the world. But this is where it also gets really complicated for me, because we've talked about free speech, free markets, capitalism, these Western values, these long-held Western values. What's interesting when you go to Eastern cultures, some of these more what we deem oppressive regimes, which lack the freedom of speech, lack the human rights, but by the traditional measures of standard of living, economically is improving, but again, there's huge wealth gaps there as well. It gets highly complex, because what you and I might sit here and be in a complete agreement about the Western values, but then we could have someone from the east of the world who sees the world completely differently, and we could be in conflict. But the reality is now we're seeing those polarities unfold here, and people think Ukraine is the pawn, which in many ways it is, but now is Russia the pawn between the battle between America and Ukraine? America and China. That's where I'm looking at this, because that's where the real macro picture is, that many of us are distorted. But even Biden and America, I think they've lost sight that their ability as a superpower is dwindling over this. So to me, this is one of the most fascinating times to be alive. How will it end? I don't know. I have no idea. But it seems that Putin is intent on seeing a replacement of the leadership in Ukraine, someone that will categorically refuse to join NATO. That's what he is pursuing. how you get to that point, whether it's some peaceful agreement that says, okay, we won't join NATO for now, maybe that's the concession he's looking for.
So let me ask you this then, Dan. Where will the New World Order be? What is this New World Order? I mean, there's the New World Order that everyone thinks is linked to the WEF and Own Nothing and Be Happy and Klaus Schwab. And, you get all these sound bites that everyone puts on your feed on your lives. But there's also a New World Order of where we come out of this. For the UK, Brexit, COVID, and this war, and the massive increase in cost of living is like unprecedented. Mm-hmm. The tax increases, we're not we're not that far off where we were in the early 80s. The increased cost of living is apparently at record high for something like 60 odd years. Inflation, if they tell you it's 7.9%, it's probably 12.5% because they don't include everything in inflation figures. So there's massive price pressure upwards. The supply chain is clearly still not fully flowed again. So there's a lack of production and manufacturing and probably a lack of innovation compared to a healthy economy. So we've got all of this pressure everywhere. Where is the New World Order?
Well, the fact that we've used the word New World Order is almost as controversial as using the term Putin several times. And I'm sure after we look at this, we'll see that, and I mentioned the word New World Order on Monday in my broadcast, and we got one of those little warnings on YouTube that talks about how the New World Order is a conspiracy theory.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it said that it was just like a Wikipedia link. It takes the top line from Wikipedia and says that it just defines New World Order to give you context. If you hadn't already got the context of the conversation, you can read the one-liner from Wikipedia that says...
But a New World Order could just be evolution or revolution of where we go outside of this...
Absolutely.
...crazy last few years. It doesn't have to be, the WEF and 12 powerful men having meetings, in their ivory towers, pressing buttons on what happens in the world and this global elite. That, to me, is a little bit more sensationalist or conspiracy theory. Here's why. Because I asked you who's running the world, and I asked David Icke who's running the world. And a lot of people that say there are these globalists running the world, no one could mention anyone's name other than Schwab. No one could.
Yeah, and this is where, again, I think, whether social media has played a role in this, we live in this world which is really radically complex. Yet we...
And then you get a nice soundbite.
Yeah, soundbite. Yeah. Everything is down in
New World Order.
New World Order, quick. Listen.
Own nothing. Be happy.
Well, exactly. But
I can tell you I'm not having that. I'm not having that.
No, exactly, yeah.
The Rothschilds, that's another one. Do you know how many Rothschilds there are? There are loads. I know it's a family that's gone back, but no one has any proof of any of this. By the way, I'm not saying yay or nay, and I'm also not sitting on the fence. But no one can specifically say this man or this woman is doing this or this. They just use sound bites like the Rothschilds or Klaus Schwab.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, carry on.
Let me speak into this then. So firstly, radical complexity. But we live in a world where we will criticize the fact that the mainstream media reduces down stories to the simplicity of Putin is evil as a simple story. And where it's quite clear, whether he is or not, is only a small part, a small strand of the kind of complex yarn ball of the kind of intricacies of the history, the economy, the politics, the relationships between nations, all of it. There's so many variables, but we reduce it down to this simplicity. The same is happening on the other side, though, but we don't hold ourselves to account. The idea that there is just a small world government or the pursuit towards a world government where single leaders control the world, I think is deeply flawed. However, it's quite clear that history has shown, what we can see for sure is that those who hold the greatest power and wealth generally determine the future of humanity. Those who own the means of production are the ones who have the greatest exertion of control and power. What's happened in the recent modern history, is that it's gone from the days of, empires and monarchs to now, the power is held in the glass towers of corporate business. And there's a big difference between capitalism and corporatism. And I think what we're witnessing now is the power and might of corporatism. So when we talk about New World Order and it's kind of reduced down to the WEF, the reality is, if you look at the WEF, it's a function of it's a think tank. It's a group of some of the wealthiest, most powerful individuals, but also companies. And the reality is they're not an organization that sits around the table and say, what innovation shall we come up with for the next decade? The companies that belong to WEF are the ones that are already innovating. So all the things around surveillance tech that we've talked about, some of the things connected to these technocratic, technological innovations that can actually compromise our freedoms, isn't the World Economic Forum saying we're determining the future. It's actually a function of the individual businesses. However, when they come together and they witness the economic opportunity that comes from this, of course their interests start to align around the usual drivers, which is long-term productivity, long-term economic interests. So the reality is they have an enormous amount of power, but I don't believe personally that Schwab is the man pulling the strings, that he is determining what all of these different business leaders are doing. Plus, you just have to look at human behavior. You know, you and I could be the two most powerful people in the world, but unless we see the world exactly the same, at some point we're going to fall out. I mean, even during this conversation, we could fall out over something. So the idea that you can get 10, 100, 1,000 of the world's wealthiest people in a room, all cooperating, doing the same thing for a prolonged period of time, to me is just a flaw. I mean, how many people have been in a relationship with anyone that has not come down to a conflict at some point?
So are you saying there should be one world leader then?
No, absolutely not. No, but the reality is what we have here is these groups, and you know, the World Economic Forum are just one of them, but these congregations of wealth and power have taken different forms over the years, but where we are seeing a very different form now is that, as we touched upon earlier today, the technology is now playing a major determining factor. The reality is these are unelected official. You know, they're innovators, they're entrepreneurs typically.
Which let me just jump in on that one. Like, the most valuable people in society probably should be the engineers and the tech people who move humanity forward the most. So as you said that, I almost thought, well, who would I rather have? An elected politician who's learned the political system, or Elon Musk, who's a billionaire who's created useful products and services? Who would I rather have as dictating the evolution of the world? Like, for example, who would I rather have spend and invest 10 billion of taxpayers' money? The US government or Elon Musk? Elon Musk all day long. If you give Elon Musk let's say there's a choice where there's 10 billion of tax-paid money, and you and I get to choose where it's given, and where it's given they have to invest it wisely for the betterment of humanity. Stays in the government or goes to Elon Musk? Who are you giving it to? Well, who are you giving it to?
Well, who am I giving it to? I mean, that's a difficult question, but I think it comes down to what's your outcome. But this is what democracy is supposed to be, though.
Evolve humanity. Is that not the purpose of humanity?
Yes, but how do you define an evolved humanity? If we're measuring it by simply because at the moment a standard of living is defined by two things. One.
See the political way you didn't answer that question.
You saw that.
Let's ask everyone here.
Yeah, who would you vote for?
Yeah. Who would you give 10 billion of taxpayers' money to, assuming they were both tasked with the same thing, which is to better humanity? Would you give it to Elon Musk or would you give it to the US government? Like, in the UK, who would I want to give 10 billion of tax-paid money to? Richard Branson or the UK government?
Yes.
Well, the UK government's too big, as is the US government. They've got too many staff. They're one of the, they've had a pay rise through this, and their terms are short.
Yep.
They're not incentivized for 10, 20-year plans.
Part of the problem.
Whereas entrepreneurs are.
Yep.
Because they want to leave a legacy. So I'm giving it to Branson or Musk all day long. What about, let's see what everyone else thinks. Someone said they'd give it to you, Dan.
Thanks.
Dan wouldn't want it. You wouldn't want it. Anyway, so I interrupted you, but you were politically answering the question.
I was, but for an important reason. So, and again, let's take it back to Brexit, okay? So you've asked me, would I choose between the current or British leader,
a tech entrepreneur who's improving the world, or the government
Well, so let me explain why I partially dodged or temporarily dodged your question. So let's look at the incentives for both of those. So the entrepreneur's incentive in the current way that the world works is to advance economic outcomes. So to increase profit, usually in the current system, for the shareholders. Now, if those shareholders have a diversified set of interests.
Well, not all of them.
Well, not all of them. No,
Some of them want to create meaningful products and services that change the world and make a difference.
Yeah.
I think he is that.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean,
he gave the technology of the battery to his competitors.
True. Yeah. I mean, he's doing things very differently.
He gave Ukraine Starlink internet. So. Yeah.
But the point for me is, and this is why I use the Brexit piece, because in order to answer the question, you need to understand what you're voting for. So if I'm voting, if I had to choose between Musk on very limited information, other than what I've perceived him to do within business, versus a politician with very limited information, how can I make a selection? The bigger question to me comes, what are we actually voting for? And that's why I asked, what's the outcome? Because if standard of living is only measured by increased productivity in the form of GDP per capita, output per individual, and length of life, what about quality of life? What about the joy de vivre? Because on one hand, we live in the most prosperous, technologically advanced, economically advanced, even in the fact that we've got this recession, there is more money in the world than history. But our mental health, our physical health is declining. So which of those individuals is going to look at the incentive structures and say, how do we balance economic progress with technological progress, with nature, with our own livelihoods, our joy, our interconnectedness, our freedoms, our liberties? I don't know, without the information of studying those individuals, who's going to be best suited to do that. And the fact is, we live in a system where we are constantly presented with two choices. And we've been presented with some awful choices in the last decade, which is part of the problem.
But then when you have 132 choices, you can't make a choice.
Well, that's true. Also,
you haven't even yet given an answer.
No,
so
I haven't.
That is a paradox.
So let me elaborate even further. So placing the emphasis on one person, I consider myself to be relatively widely read, but I'm a master of none, effectively. I have a wide range of understanding of some. I have some mastery in some areas. I'll give myself that. But if I want to improve the economic situation, I would find someone, perhaps Musk, perhaps yourself, Rob, who has an understanding of how to improve the economic situation. But I wouldn't want them to be the only person making those decisions. I want to see, and this is where we need to look at how do we evolve the political system, because how do we move away from. And let's look at representative democracy. My MP in my area, think about your MP in your area. What is your MP actually an expert in? How are they supposed to improve the economy in your area? How are they supposed to, improve the kind of livelihoods of individuals and the joy and well-being of individuals? How are they supposed to improve the local environment if they have no knowledge of any of these things? We live in a system, but then I'm not advocating, therefore, for technocracy, because technocracy is saying, well, you're a scientist, you're an economist, you make the decisions, you know best. We need to find a way to incorporate, because the politicians should be a reflection of what the interests of humanity are, but the reality is, as history has shown us, entrepreneurs know this. If you'd asked people in the early 1900s, what do you want? They would have said, I want a faster horse. A faster horse that can carry more luggage. And you know what? You could conjure up some new horse feed that makes them go that extra miles an hour faster, or you can build a car that enables you to. And again, then we go into an existential argument about what the car has done for the environment. There's always second-order consequences. I still haven't answered your question, but my point. It's all
right, I'm just enjoying the show.
But my point is, this is complex, and I think we're at a point in history where we live amongst exponential technology, which, we in the context and the lens of war, we've.
Let me jump in here.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
I'm on one.
Just remember what you are about to say, because I need to address something. I think we have to go further and think about what is the purpose of humanity.
Good one.
Which isn't really talked about much. Now, I'm going to put a theory out there that the purpose of humanity is not happiness. So the resistance to economic growth, technological advancement or whatever is, well, quality of life and work-life balance and 4-day work week and let's be more happy and, blah, 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 more present. that's not, I'm going to discuss with you, and I love your thoughts on this, that's not the purpose of life. Because imagine if we're all happy. We're not producing, we're not hustling, we're not striving, we're not struggling, we're not figuring stuff out. What are we doing? Chilling, relaxing. And I think if I have understood the universe right, everything is either growing or dying and nothing is standing still, and energy just transfers into new forms. There's chaos and order, there's death and life. There is no stasis. So we naively, I believe, all of us go into a fantasy of, I want it to be easy, I want it to be fun, I want it to be nice, I want everyone to be happy, I want to, have the quality of life. But part of the quality of life is the endurance and the overcoming of the struggle and the challenge and the hardship. And the struggle and the challenge and the hardship, I believe, is there to force you to grow. And why do you need to grow? Because you need to evolve as a human being to your ever-increasing challenging environment. That's my theory.
I'm so pleased you brought it to this, because...
So you said joy to vive, but we need to produce.
Yes,
we
agreed.
need to evolve, we need to grow, and we need challenge and stress to do that.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, I'm not saying we should ignore those metrics. They are that they are a reflection of that challenge, and we are facing some of the greatest challenges that we've ever faced. Now, so to bring that purpose, evolution, let's look at those two pieces. Hold me to account to answering the question. Let's look at that then. So, okay, fulfillment. Where does fulfillment come from? Because happiness, I'm happy to be here with you today, Rob. I'm having a lovely time. After this, I'll jump in a taxi, get caught in traffic, perhaps not have enough time to grab any food at the station, and all of a sudden my happiness has gone away. But it's
because happiness is a fantasy.
It's fleeting.
Yeah.
It's fleeting.
Happiness is the reward. It's the chemical reward, the 4 kind of chemicals. That's what happiness is. Fulfillment and happiness are very different.
Yes. But, take that example. I get in a taxi, I have like 1 minute to spare. I manage to still find a way to get some food in me before I get on the train. That brings me happiness. It's like, boom, problem solved. So is the purpose of life then purely to adapt and survive? The humans have shown through history. But
I would say that the purpose of humanity on a macro level is to survive. And how do we survive? We evolve through and react to our environment to overcome the challenges from the environment, whether it's other predators or, the weather or the geology or whatever. That, I believe, I'm not going to sit here and say I know the purpose of life. I'm going to say I believe that's closer to the purpose of life than happiness is. What's happiness? It's the reward. We need a reward to go through the challenge and the struggle, otherwise we're not going to bother. But would you agree, the harder the struggle, the greater the happiness reward you get at the end of it?
That's certainly been my experience.
Yeah, so if you run a marathon, you're going to feel better than, if you jogged 20 meters. Or at least afterwards, the euphoria and the feeling of, I overcame something is going to be greater. So I believe chemically we're rewarded directly linked to the scale of the problem that we overcome.
Yes.
And fulfillment is going through challenges to have high-level feelings of reward, to fill our voids. Fulfill is to fill our voids. Happiness is the fleeting reward we get because we need some kind of reward, otherwise we're not going to go through the struggle. So this is what I think a lot of people at the moment are, well, it's all about being happy and it's about work-life balance and it's about, experiencing the joy of life and all of that kind of stuff. That, if you think that is the purpose of life, that is the outcome of life, that will create the biggest amount of unhappiness in your life because that is a naive fantasy.
Yes.
That's my theory.
Yes. Okay, so let's bring it back to 2 fundamentals then. So the reason we went on this track is because the equation of what is GDP per capita output as a measure of standard of living, that does not account for all of those things that go into that. It doesn't account for, it accounts for only man's or humankind's move towards economic prosperity, which may encompass some of that challenge, overcoming the challenge, but it doesn't account for some of the variables. So the fact that we're talking here today about cancel culture, freedom of speech, the reality is we now live in a world of exponential technology, what we're seeing with AI and all of these different types of technologies that are growing, surveillance state. We could have, according to that metric of GDP, we could in the age of automation and AI, we could radically transform production in terms of our output through those technologies. However, the human experience within that, you could take a culture where you could automate everything. You could cancel free speech. What quality of life would we have left? And that's the point we're at this unique juncture in history, which I find that's why it's very hard for me to answer the question, Musk, Branson, or these, because these individuals are a function of what's gone before us. But we're at this precipice now where there's new types of technology. And talking about war, I want to put it in the context of the war because we opened it up with this. Off the back of World War II, we had mutually assured destruction, meaning you've got a nuclear weapon here in your office, I've got one in mine. If you press yours, I'll press mine, we were all dead. So it gave us a sense of peace. We came peace through the threat of destruction. But the reality is with new forms of technology is that is no longer restricted to nation states. Anyone can take a drone, load it up with explosives and fly it into a building. So we've got a democratization of technology, some of which will have fantastic, positive, practical application. But we no longer live in a world where our safety and security from a perspective of that level of destruction is limited to nation states or individual leaders. That's the reality. So we're at a point in history where the people we choose to govern the future from here need to have an understanding of the risks facing humanity as of today of those exponential technologies. Elon Musk, he's probably going to be closer to understanding what those are. But if his objective is to advance his own aims at the expense of other variables, how can I vote for that guy without knowing what his intentions are? But even in the world of politics, we know it every single time. You come to vote, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. In history, how many times does a politician actually follow through what they're going to say, what they've said? It's complex, Rob. That's my message through all of this is we need to stop reducing.
Okay, so it's complex and we can't reduce it into sound bites or binary decisions. I hear you.
Yep.
But each time you say things like that, for me, sometimes it's complex. It's a cop-out from making a decision.
Yep.
So, because I think the more you understand something, the more you realise there is beneath it. And many people have said that the smarter they get, the more they realise they don't know. So if things are too complicated, we don't make any progress.
Agreed.
Because we just go, well, the 78 variables, I don't know.
Yes.
So Musk or the government?
Which government?
Well, we'll go Musk or US government. 10 billion to progress humanity.
I would take Musk over Biden.
Yeah, okay. And then Branson or the UK government?
I would take Branson over the current UK government.
Because the things that entrepreneurs aren't often given credit for, whether the entrepreneur is still the main principal shareholder or whether there is a lot of other shareholders, these are the people that have built the bridges. These are the people who've got rid of the diseases and wiped out many diseases that previously wiped out nations. The engineers are the people who have made this world more livable so that we can grow and evolve. And entrepreneurs often are engineer types who've learned to scale what they do. And they're often not given credit for that. You have to be an engineer to get oil, not just a greedy capitalist. So actually, entrepreneurs are often engineers that are progressing humanity. You got to drive here nice and easily, and we can connect with each other that we wouldn't be able to do if it wasn't for the faster horse, which was Henry Ford's Model T Ford.
Rob, for those who have been watching from my audience that perhaps haven't come across your work before, tell us a little bit about where people can find out more about your podcast and the work that you do.
So I'm the author of the book Money. You can also find my podcast Money on all social medias. My name is Rob Moore, so I'm very active on all social media. My Facebook lives get millions of views, so you might want to follow me on Facebook, but my name is Rob Moore. And Dan, for my audience, what about you, Dan Gregory? Where can we find you? Where are you ranting?
Well, I'm ranting at the moment within the confines of Facebook, YouTube, where I'm currently permitted to rant. So yeah, you'll find my podcast on my Facebook profile that you've been watching on today, Dan Aston Gregory. You'll see us on YouTube again under Dan Aston Gregory. We also have a platform called Elevate Network, where you'll find at weareelevate.org.
Before we finish, Dan, and we've got to do this one more from Tracy Jane. Should we be taking our money out of the bank? Here's my thoughts on this. You should not have more money in the bank than the bank will guarantee. Inflation is very high. Quantitative easing and the printing of money is very high, both of which lead to your money being worth less every year. But your bank is a good way to save money, and you need a bank account to pay your expenses. So I recommend that you have a bank account for all of your main expenses and you just feed that with enough. Then you have your savings account, but your goal should be to get an amount that you can invest as quick as possible, and then you get it out of the bank and you get it into crypto, or you get it into property or real estate, or you get it into buying websites and domain names, or starting a business, or creating an NFT, or investing in an NFT, or into the stock market or wherever. So that's my long-winded way of saying you need bank accounts, because there are a lot of people who are so crypto-based, they don't want any fiat currency. Yeah. That's kind of not possible.
It's a little ahead of the game.
Yeah, exactly. It's too far ahead. But if you don't invest your savings, it's a difference of at least 15% a year right now. 10% minimum inflation, 5% return on standard return on cash. So leaving money in the bank minimum is losing you 15% a year. They're my thoughts on should you leave the money in the bank and should you take it out. Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pertinent advice. I think under these conditions, we've talked throughout this episode about cycles, market cycles. I would invest time understanding the economic and political cycles in terms of where we are today, because it shows predictable patterns about where we're likely to go in the future on an economic basis. And there are always winners and losers under these types of conditions. And there are certain behaviors and actions that those take that not only protect their money, but find ways to use it meaningfully and productively to grow it. So look to history, look at where we are in the market cycle. There's plenty of education out there on that, and act accordingly. But I think under these types of conditions, banks may not be the safest place, but there are guarantees in place. So you learn about those guarantees. There's a maximum amount in the UK, at least, that you'd want to put in any individual bank from a safety point of view. That is government backed. So unless are we at the point of collapse of central banks and government? I don't think we're only there. But again, look to history for clues.
Because warning, all these people who say you shouldn't have any money in the bank, cash is trash, get it out, put it in crypto. Well, crypto is far more risky and far more volatile. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have crypto, but I think you should be aware of that as a risk, and you should only probably have risk capital and capital you can afford to lose until you understand a lot about it. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thank you.
By the way, make sure you share this as well.
And if anyone wants to keep in count, let us know how many times you've said Putin, and we'll find out afterwards if we've matched that limit or not. But we seem to be still here. So thank you so much for being with us. Please do share this, and really appreciate all of you sharing and engaging throughout this episode.
My man, Dan Gregory.
My man, Rob.